Oh man, how much Fenrisian ale did I drink last night? Oh,
Oh, hi
what?
there. Welcome back, Titus.
Who are you? What happened to me?
Alright, so here's what happened. And so, yeah, that's it. You're a Primaris Marine now, and you'll be reassigned to a new squad, but, don't tell them about your past as a member of the Black Shields, okay?
Thank you, brother. Hey, you know what? Thank you for being so understanding. Unlike this guy I knew like 100 years ago named Leandros. He fucking sucked. He's part of the reason I'm in this mess in the first place. He was a real dick.
Oh, yeah, that dude sounds awful. Just the worst. Anyways, I have a ceremony to perform. See ya, Titus.
Well, that was weird. Hello all and welcome to I Suck at Video Games, and today we are looking at the already beloved Space Marine 2, a hack-and-slash shooter combo that was developed by American studio Saber Interactive and published by French publisher Focus Entertainment, their second straight game being discussed on the channel. Space Marine 2 is the long-awaited sequel to the original from 2011 that follows the story of Dimitri and Titus, a member of the Ultramarines. Here in the sequel, though, you are no longer dealing with the orcs, but instead fighting against an imposing Tyranid invasion. Right off the bat, I have to say that this game is just fucking awesome at times, and it deserves the praise it has been receiving from the general public and critics alike. Like the previous title reviewed on this channel, Evil West, the game nicely blends a third-person shooting element with its hack-and-slash style melee combat that both result in a satisfying amount of viscera being shed everywhere. Obviously, like any game, there are going to be some drawbacks, and with Space Marine 2, I find them to be few and far in between, and those will obviously be addressed throughout the video. As the title suggests, my main gripe with the campaign side of things within Space Marine 2 is simply because I find it too short, and I believe that the game could have had an extra hour or two maybe, especially considering the fact that this game was delayed by basically a year after originally being slated for release back in 2023. That means that there is a possibility that there was some material cut out in development and the devs did decide on making a shorter and more precise campaign, which if that's the case I can respect it. While the campaign itself has a co-op feature, the game also features two other modes outside of it, Operations and Eternal War. The Operations mode is kind of cool because it connects into the storyline, because those modes essentially follow separate groups within the storyline executing other tasks within the campaign, so it makes up for the length towards the end in my opinion, I guess. Before the review properly begins, however, a few things should be discussed. 1. Spoilers ahead. If the intro of this video was not indicative of that, spoilers ahead pertaining to the entire story of Space Marine 2 and pretty much the ending of Space Marine 1 as well. You have officially been warned. 2. Admittedly, I am a recent fan to the Warhammer franchise, as like many others, I started becoming a fan during the COVID lockdown era, and throughout both Warhammer content creators and suggested literature, I have become a middling fan in this realm of science fiction. I certainly do not know everything when it comes to Warhammer, and I will outright say I do not claim to. My review of this game will be judging it purely as a video game, so I apologize if I omit any details within the game or get certain contextual lore bits wrong as well. Feel free to comment down below on correcting those things and especially adding information, as I am always fascinated by learning more about 40k. It is just that I've only read so much personally. If it matters, my favorite chapter is the Imperial Fist, and as far as the Astra Militarum goes, the Death Corps of Krieg are pretty cool, and as a history major, I dig their total World War I aesthetic. 3. This last one goes for my friends who also happen to live north of the border in Canada. Listen, I love this country, I really do. The landscapes, the people, the goslings, and of course the hockey. I truly believe everybody should be proud of the place that they're from, but yeah, that price tag fucking blows. Yeah, your eyes do not deceive you. That is a $93.99 game here in Canada, and I know why that is the case. Obviously, you have, inflation, and obviously the Canadian dollar is struggling, so they have to price it differently. And I'm also aware of the fact that it's now becoming more common for games to be releasing at the like $69.99 or $79.99 price tag in the States now. So unfortunately, it is a problem that affects a lot of us. So What a time to be alive. So without further ado, don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy it, and click the little bell icon right beside it to be notified about every new upload on this channel. So enough yapping, let's now dive into Space Marine 2. The game opens up panning over the orbit of the imperial planet of Kadaku during the onset of a Tyranid invasion, which features some stunning visuals including this dope reflection shot of a guardsman looking up at falling Tyranid spores. The graphics for the game are usually pretty solid, the cutscenes look great, but with some moments the graphics patch in after a cut to a different character within like the in-game engine cutscenes as opposed to like the cinematic style ones. You really see a clear difference between the two, so it's not really anything major. But anyways, the monitor screen displays the information that Kadaku is an important planet and its defense of it is of the utmost importance, and so a group of Deathwatch Space Marines are dispatched to the surface to detonate a virus bomb to slow down the Tyranids. And I mean, the game does not waste any time delaying the awesomeness that is within this campaign, as the dropship the Deathwatch soldiers are in is almost immediately swarmed by gargoyles, and the soldiers inside do not play around, and I mean, I have it playing in the background, you see what I'm talking about, this shit is awesome. And just as if the slaying of dozens of those gargoyles wasn't cool enough, the currently unnamed Deathwatch soldier that you are playing as gets knocked out of the dropship as it's descending into a hard crash, and at first I honestly thought that because of the red hood, this was meant to be like a red shirt of the group type joke and he was just gonna die.
Nope.
No, it turns out that he just turns and faces the ground and accepts the impact and prepares for it. Pretty badass in my opinion. You awake and it is time for the opening / tutorial level as a member of the Deathwatch. You are playing as the kill team leader and the bomb is at the crash site of the dropship, and of course your Vox comms are not getting through to your squad mates. Your goal is simple: locate the crash site and recover the bomb and move to detonate it. On the way, of course, you are introduced to the basics of the game's combat and also learning your enemies. The game pretty much has the same enemies throughout the game in terms of Tyranids, with a few minor additions in the form of special boss-like enemies later on. Obviously, the combat is a lot of fun, from the gunplay with the bolters and pistols you have at your disposal, and of course slaying Tyranids with the chainsword is mighty satisfying. Probably my favorite mechanic of the combat would be the counter system, that if timed right you will catch the smaller Tyranids and instantly end their existence with some finishing maneuver, and it's so fucking sick, especially in the heat of combat. It is also really awesome because not only does it make the player feel like an absolute badass, but also sells how incredibly skilled these Space Marines are as warriors. As the mission goes on, you will overhear the comms of your squad mates who appear to be as scattered as you are, and they are dealing with their own swarms of Tyranids attacking them as well, so as the level progresses, they all slowly die one by one. You retrieve the virus bomb from your dead brother and continue the mission to go and detonate it. Still, your comms are damaged and you fail to contact the rest of your squad mates. You make your way to the orbital launcher and slice through the hordes of Tyranids to launch the virus into the atmosphere, and you are ultimately successful. At that moment, you also get the first taste of this game sending large, massive swarms of Tyranids at you, and I really think Saber Interactive really made good usage of their engine and hardware to make these large battles going on within each level, with large swarms of enemies and even realistic groups of allied troops involved as well. It's really just a nice experience for the player to be involved in a large-scale conflict, and it's something I will probably repeat numerous times throughout this video. You detonate the bomb and continue to fight off the beast, and at one point the player character gets overwhelmed and knocked off the platform, and he's hurt and covered in Tyranid blood, and he removes his helmet to reveal that you have actually been playing as Dimitri and Titus, the player character from the first game, who also happens to be the guy on the front cover of this game. Shocker, I know. He removes his helmet, and it's feeling it's a little too early to be having a final stand, but here we are, and the enemies come barreling towards Titus, including a fucking Carnifex. The Carnifex actually gets the best of Titus and deals a seemingly fatal blow towards him and drives its bladed end into his chest. At that moment, you are saved by some basically unseen ally, but it's obviously the Ultramarines, because who else but Gilliman's boys. Titus then wakes up aboard the battle barge the Resilient in the orbit of Kadaku. Titus is immediately greeted by the chaplain right at his bedside. The chaplain informs Titus of what happened. The wound from the Carnifex was indeed fatal, and Titus was then remade with the Rubicon surgery, and was even remade into a Primaris Marine, the Jackson Storm to the Space Marines Lightning McQueen. This decision was put forth by none other than Lord Calgar, who also decided to reinstate Titus to the Ultramarines and placed him within a new squad. The chaplain also seems to be taking issue with Titus being around, given his past accusations of heresy and corruption stemming from the first game. Now that you are remade, it is time to get back into the fight, but first you must go and see Captain Akaran to know your orders. He has fears over your addition to the team and seems to know your backstory to an extent, I guess, and hopes that you will not cause any discord amongst the men. to which he ironically does himself as he places you in charge of a new squad. We were then introduced to Sergeant Gadriel, who was actually just bumped down in command by Titus's arrival. He obviously does not get much say in the matter, and that face does not lie, he is certainly not a fan of that update. Your squad is being sent back to the surface of Kadaku to defend large orbital guns that have been key in protecting the skies, and the swarm of Tyranids has decided to focus its attack on the guns, so naturally Titus and crew are being sent to remedy the situation. We then meet the rest of the group, including Chiron, Lirio, Altarius, and Elion, but really the only one that matters is Chiron, as he's the other bot that sticks with the player character throughout the campaign alongside Gadriel. Because of the change in squad leadership, Gadriel is immediately kind of suspicious of Titus being in the squad, and of course his past as well, striking up some conversation in the Thunderhawk asking about his service in the Death Watch.
Sir, you served in the Death Watch.
Yes.
That must have been a great honor. It's a privilege to serve with you.
Approaching drop zone. Let's go.
He also makes a fun aside to Chiron on the ship, which Chiron has a great remark for.
You see those service studs?
Our lieutenant is over 200 years old.
He couldn't have been born a Primaris.
You're right.
And now he has your command.
You make it to the surface of Kadaku and link up with the 8th Cadian Regiment on the ground, and oh man, just the visual of this large-scale battle occurring is just so well done in my opinion. That is another really commendable thing for this game, and its level design is that every major battle scene within the game is incredibly detailed and lived in. It does not feel super structured, I will say though, but I believe that lends to the chaos of fighting Tyranids. It reminds me of how the old 2D Clone Wars really made the scales of the battles something spectacular to see, with large battlefields with fire occurring all over. Also, the way the game handles the Astra Militarum is also really well done in my opinion, as they operate as competent AI companions within the levels, at least in my experience. I'm also glad they did not make them pushovers against the monstrous Tyranids within the game, and they could actually put up a fight. I especially fuck heavy with this one animation that you can see in the game that shows a Cadian soldier fighting off the Tyranid, sitting back up and shooting it dead. That is an amazing detail included in the game. I treated the Astra Militarum in this game the same way probably anybody treats the UNSC Marines in the Halo campaigns. I tried my absolute best to keep as many alive as possible, though most times I feel like that is next to impossible. Continuing on with the story, Titus and the boys make their way through swaths of Tyranids and have to assist two distant groups of Cadians to fend off some attackers, and you linked up with a Captain Iden, and his men were preparing for an assault on the orbital guns. Also, Sarkana, who is the leader of the 8th Cadian Regiment, is also a pretty solid character, whose lines do a really good job of selling how tough and capable they are as fighters. Titus and Iden's soldiers make their attack on the guns, and it's just so fucking cool to have the soldiers and the tank with the player characters as you take on the enemy. I love it when a shooter makes the war feel realistic in scope as much as they can. The fight towards the orbital guns is really where I first began to enjoy the combat and gunplay within the game. The gameplay in the background is from the first raw run through of this game, so it did take me a moment to get the hang of things, and by this time I felt comfortable in the gameplay loop. Now, with that being said, I did only play the game on the normal base difficulty, and I would not personally describe the game as hard, as it is more overwhelming at times. It is understandable, as that comes with the territory of facing Tyranids, I imagine. This is a game that I will probably do another run through on a higher difficulty for fun, and when I get bored of the multiplayer eventually. The fight to get closer to the guns is also very fun, I will say, and this is where I would watch the guardsmen do their thing before finally dropping down and getting involved, and it makes me so happy to see that these moments get better later on in the game. Titus and the guardsmen are successful in taking the guns in the control room, and Sarkana flies in to take further command. The guns have been dormant for some time and have to recharge and awake the machine spirit, says the sanctioned heretic by the computer. Sarkana has to divert more Cadian forces towards the orbital guns, as now it is time to defend the guns from the Tyranid hive and give them time to activate. This kicks off the first overwhelming / difficult part of the game, at least for me personally. Honestly, I think the game was slightly more difficult because I played with two AI companions and not utilizing the co-op abilities of the game, Nobody I knew personally had the game besides me. First, you have to access the targeting system, and between you and the system is of course a shit ton of enemies. This small part of the mission is really fun to me because of how much they bunch up at the walls and try to climb up like this is fucking World War Z, and I particularly loved tossing frag grenades into said large piles of Xenos and enjoyed watching them subsequently flying around. It was quite fun. Afterwards, you have to raise the pedals, so I guess to help charge up the orbital guns, and while doing so, you are constantly harassed by enemies, and it gets kinda annoying. The Tyranid gargoyles then begin to attack the targeting antenna, and that is probably my least favorite part of the game, as the amount of enemies and large swarms of gargoyles do take up a lot of ammunition to deal with. Then I started tossing nades at them, and everything seemed fine. Once you survive that onslaught, it is now time to
Fire giant boob nipple gun.
I know it doesn't look like that, but just let me have my fun here, okay? I'm sorry. I will say though, the visuals for this scene are really well done, as the large explosion signals the end of this mission, as Titus and co are back on board the Thunderhawk. Real quick though, upon returning to the battle barge, you meet up with the other half of your squadron, who had been given some different orders who were split up when you guys made it to the surface. You discover that Ilion had died, and Gadriel does not take this news too well.
I fought beside Ilion for 2 decades. He could not have been defeated by Hormigons.
There are creatures more deadly than Hormigons down there.
You should not have let our squad be divided.
He is gone, Sergeant. Duty is all.
I do not forget my brothers, so
I feel like the other half of the squad was meant to be more important in the campaign and maybe even in the operation side of things, but again, connecting back to the point of there being some material on the cutting room floor, that kind of feels like one of them perhaps. Early on, there is some moments of conflict between Titus and Gadriel, and Gadriel is, in my opinion, the more interesting of the two characters between him and Chiron, but both, in my opinion, are serviceable characters, and I like them both. Next, Titus must report to Captain Akran, but first we must take an elevator up to him. Throughout the game, both in between each mission and even in the missions themselves, when all characters find themselves together in an elevator, that is usually where some important character work is done between at least the 3 main Marines in the game through dialogue. Akaran then divulges the next orders for the boys, and that they have to go and retrieve an Archmagus and get him off the surface. The catch? Dickhead won't leave without some crucial important data, and so Titus and his squad are sent to deal with it. Before going into the mission to retrieve Nozick and his data, we are introduced to how the operations side of things will play into the campaign. Titus has to dispatch another squad to deal with a promethium refinery that will aid in creating a large inferno blaze that will slow down the enemy. So that side of the mission can be played through the operations mode, and that will occur in some of the other missions later on. Also, the armory is introduced here as well, and before the mission commences, you receive some more suspicion from the chaplain Quintus. When you arrive on the surface, you yet again meet up with the 8th Cadian forces, and you speak with Nozick and Sarkana, as the data is being held in a separate lab in a different location. They have even mentioned that they have dispatched other squads of men to retrieve the data and have all perished, so something is definitely out there waiting for them. So then off the men go to grab the data and slay Xenos along the way, along with this fun line of banter between Gadriel and Chiron.
see that you do. We will never get this planet's stench out of our armor.
Compared to your usual aura, it is an improvement, brother.
Clear news.
Throughout the level and in between smashing enemies, there are small moments where there is something moving around in the distance, hunting and watching the trio of characters. When the men finally arrive at the lab, this enemy is revealed to be a lictor, a devastating beast that is capable of cloaking itself, which is honestly pretty neat, and as it stands as the game's first boss-like enemy with its health bar displayed above, I will take this time to mention that these sort of moments are not too difficult. The boss fights honestly do not ever feel too difficult within the game, and that is part of the reason I do intend to give the campaign another go on a harder difficulty to try and face some more challenge that way. Once inside the lab, the men are then directed to locate a transmitter, and honestly, each communication with Nozick makes him more unlikable each time. That's not a criticism for the game, as he is clearly meant to be a Mechanicus douche canoe.
Because for the last time, we must get you off-world.
Assessment equals inordinate ignorance.
We'll be overrun in minutes.
By the omnissiah cease interruptions.
Major. We never saw the attack coming.
Inefficiency is unacceptable. Re-entering.
Spare me the insults, Magos.
Statement error. Insults. I engage in pure analysis. Locate primary transmitter. Coordinates inbound.
I have had more pleasant conversations with orcs.
This next section brings with it my next least favorite moment of the campaign, and that is this section with the Rippers and the Pyreblaster. You discover one of your dead brothers and make the obvious connection that the Rippers managed to get inside his suit and kill him that way. You grab his Pyreblaster and make your way into the darkly lit lab. You'll use the Pyreblaster as the main gimmick in this level, as it's used to keep the large gathering swarms of Rippers away from you. It's just a bogged down section in my opinion and slows down the gameplay in a way I don't like, and maybe that's just me, maybe the story and gameplay does not need to be going at a white scar level speed and could use something like this to break up the fast pace, but personally I just wasn't a fan of this. Towards the end of the mission, you do receive word that the second squad was actually successful in their attack on the Prometheum refinery, and it caused an inferno so big that the Tyranid level dropped by 90%. Titus and the boys must keep pushing to retrieve the data for Nozick, and you finally retrieve the data transmitter, and of course it is dormant or whatever, and you of course have to let it start up, and that means defending it from enemies while this happens. Finally, you send the data, and Chiron takes a bold chance trying to ascertain what the research might be about, to which he is denied by Nozick.
I shall be glad to be rid of these trivial duties.
As I will be glad to cease the flapping of this repugnant flesh voice.
From here, the team heads to the surface to make contact with Lirio as he has retrieved the data and loaded Nozick into a Thunderhawk, and we can see them taking off for the battle barge. But at that moment, though, the Thunderhawk carrying Lirio and Nozick is struck and comes crashing down in flames. They also happen to land deep into enemy territory, and the group needs to get there fast to retrieve Nozick and his data, and Gadriel has the great idea to use the armoring chamber in the lab to attain jump packs. The jump packs, first and foremost, are pretty fucking cool and allow for a new type of melee attack with the jumping charge attack that also allows you to hover and fire as well. Also, Sarkana continues to be a cool character within the game, as she insists the men focus on getting to Nozick and don't worry about the Cadians.
Sir, the guardsmen.
With respect, my lord! We're Cadians! We can take care of ourselves!
Before being able to reach Nozick, however, you are blocked off by a large biomass wall and have to fight off a large group of enemies and plant melta charges to bring it down. Also, I will say and admit something that may be embarrassing as a newcomer to 40k to so loudly admit, but prior to this game I was actually completely unaware that Tyranids had the ability to use guns. I was under the impression Tyranids were nothing but bloodthirsty, ravenous monsters that simply accomplished their goals through dismantling their enemies with vicious numbers and teeth. So, to my surprise, Tyranids firing rifles from the distance were quite surprising, and wouldn't you know, them bastards were quite accurate as well. However, after blowing up the wall, you finally reach the crash site, and this shit is not looking like any normal crash site. Guardsmen are dead, parts are everywhere, blood is everywhere, Lirio is dead.
If you noticed, but you got a crack in your windshield.
Oh, and not to mention Nozick got murdered in a ritualistic style, judging by the style of pike that he has inserted through his midsection. Also, judging by the red markings all over the ship coinciding with the display of bodies, the men make the deduction that chaos is here on Kadaku. Titus also has this weird moment where he is seemingly attracted to some object within the crash site, and it causes him to fall weak and drop to a knee and have some weird moment. I feel like we, the player, are supposed to connect the dots automatically that this is in reference to the issues of corruption that Titus was accused of in the past, and perhaps sow some further dissension amongst the men, I guess, within story, because it doesn't happen again later on, and it doesn't really get brought up too many times. A separate team then shows up to collect the mysterious item from the crash site. They are acting strange as well, as the guardsmen are hastily directed to collect the item, and they torch the body of Nozick. Is there a lore reason for that? Any Mechanicus fans, feel free to let me know in the comments why they torch his body. Is it for the possible chaos thing that they're just not saying outright, or is there like an actual reason for that? I honestly don't know. They also tried to deny Titus and his squad entry onto their ship back to the battle barge, and even on explicit orders from Captain Akaran, but you appear on the ship, so I guess it's cool. The mission fades to black and you awake to overhear a conversation with Gadriel and Chiron as Gadriel continues to suspect something is off with Titus since he has arrived, as he still has questions about his service history. The main trio arrive to speak with Captain Acheran, and you try to tell him of what they believe is the work of Chaos. Chiron specifically steps up to back up Titus's claims, and Acheran swiftly clears the bridge and just instantly gives you the information Nozick denied previously. Like, what the fuck? They were working on a form of weapon that was being researched and developed on Kadaku, and very few people had been involved in the work. One of them being an individual named Morius Luz. He was last heard from while hiding in a Mechanicus facility on a different world named Avarax. Titus then tries to pry some information out of his commanding officer and asks about what the container on the ship with Nozick was exactly. Acheran dismisses it as no concern of Titus's and just bluntly says it will be useless without Luz, thus sending you away on your mission. Before commencing the mission, however, our good friend Chaplain Quintus has some more words for us, this time in front of our squad mates. Fucking perfect. He again worries for you to become corrupted with the arch enemy now being involved, and he urges Titus to rely on the Codex to get him through the issue. Titus seemingly brushes it off as well. You land on Avarax, and just visually speaking, I find Avarax to be a better level setting than Kadaku. The first step of the mission is to work your way towards the lab that Luz was last heard from. You have to access an elevator first, and of course, that means combat. Right off the bat, one thing I enjoy about the Avarax level is the size and scale of the world as well, and the ongoing battle around. I may begin to sound like a broken record, but I really do appreciate those background type of visuals, as I believe that is key in helping the player feel immersed in the world and makes the game more attractive. I am a sucker for great level design, and while the planets you see in the campaign are limited, and the online is limited for that matter as well in terms of maps, there's like 3 or 4, they look fantastic, and Avarax is a standout for me along with certain locations toward the end of the game. Also, another elevator, another golden bit of dialogue between brothers.
This platform's very exposed. Expect a bumpy ride. If I'm not mistaken, you've had bad luck with cargo elevators. That was a long time ago. I prefer not to discuss it. At least you made it out alive, which is more than we can say for the orcs.
Those bitch-ass gargoyles are back as well, and they are attacking the chains of the elevator platform. After making your way inside as well, there is an interesting conversation between squad mates about what they saw at the crash site.
There was a word written in blood on Nozick's Thunderhawk. Imura. Do not speak it, brother. The words of the arch-enemy hold dangerous power. One should not dismiss any data that may be relevant.
Have you ever faced the arch-enemy, Sergeant?
Regrettably, I have not.
Then I suggest you listen to your brother.
You head inside the lab, and naturally the power is off, so the team has to reset the grid and survive an onslaught of Tyranids. This time kind of fun because it is in the dark, and the fire of the weapons and explosives light up the room as you slay the Xeno scum. The team makes its way upstairs, and guess what? Knock at the door. It's time for fucking round 2 with the Carnifex as it busts through the room, and here we are, treated to another boss-like sequence.
One moment, brothers.
Xenos Hulk brought down.
I thought a beast of that stature would offer more sport.
It was outnumbered. I once faced a Carnifex alone, but nothing but a bolt pistol. That was sport.
Well, I am glad to share in the glory of this kill.
As you proceed further into the facility, you see it destroyed on the inside and find literal piles of bodies inside. You make your way to a terminal and insert this cogitator device you were given by Acheron before and use it to try and find the exact location of Luce. Oh, and Titus has the bold idea to investigate into the Project Aurora weapon that is at the center of this story. The file opens with 3 more files inside titled Reconstruction, Graia, and Drogon. Titus pushes the envelope further with him trying to open the sub-files, to which Gadriel reminds him in Leandrosian fashion that these sub-files are classified. The file opens and reveals the contents of the reconstruction effort of the Aurora project, and it makes Titus visibly upset and angry as this is in connection with the events of the first game. Graia was the Forge world where there was a new weapon being developed that was actually being made by Chaos forces using a sleeper agent. That's where the name Drogon is being in play. Project Aurora seems to be operating with a similar power source as the Spire from the first game, and that is why Titus is pissed. As Titus tries to delve further into the files, the reactor that was mentioned in-game earlier that I may or may not have left out begins to melt down, and it does not look like it'll be a good time when that thing explodes. Also, the reason this is happening is because the Tyranids are throwing themselves into the reactor. Good tactic. After defeating the Tyranids and stopping them from blowing up the reactor, the mission fades to black as the squad is taken back to the ship for it to fade back in when the team is on the elevator heading up to Acheron as Titus is going to demand some answers. Titus explains to Acheron that he has experience with the forces at play here on Avarax and tries to prove to Acheron it needs to be shut down, and is sort of dismissed by Acheron as the Mechanicus' work is supposedly approved by the Primarch himself. Also, was this scene meant to make us suspect something was up with Acheron due to him not hearing out what Titus had to say fully, how he almost insinuates why Titus is bringing up his past with Graia, and even goes as far as to threaten Titus's place with the Ultramarines? He could also very well be warning him with that last bit, and I might just be reading too much into it or misinterpreting it, but still. Before the men can make their way to rescue Maurius Luz, Gadriel has a shining moment of brilliance here as he calls out the actions of Titus. One of the overarching themes within the narrative of Space Marine 2 is the trust issues that Titus has after his former squad mate Leandros from the first game more or less betrayed him and got him into this mess by accusing him of corruption and bringing him to the Inquisition. The game is more or less hitting the halfway point of the story, so this issue is now rising to the forefront of the plot. The men make their way down to the surface to retrieve Maurius Luz, and their transport is of course shot down, but this is simply an inconvenience to our characters and makes them be far from the destination, of course, to just stretch out the level. I will say though, this level is probably one of, if not the absolute best in the game in my opinion. The level design, great. The sunlight setting, the Astra Militarum kicking absolute ass. This is one of the missions I alluded to earlier with the great design and usage of the Militarum and the surrounding area to add depth to the warfare going on and even make the scale of the battles feel more grandiose. It's crazy to say that this early level part is made even better later on within the level. Battling alongside the Astra Militarum, you meet a friend of Chiron's named Virellus, another blueberry boy who, while named, does not remove his helmet, so you know he's going to live a long and fruitful life. Virellus informs Titus and his squad about a perched Neurothorpe that is overlooking the bridge and halting their advancement as the Cadians focus on holding the bridge, so the men are off to try and flank the creature and kill it. You know the drill at this point. Elevator segment time!
What happened on Graia? Nothing good.
Can you be specific?
I would sooner focus on the mission at hand.
You are withholding information relevant to the mission at hand.
Mind yourself, Sergeant.
Your behavior has been erratic. You force your way into classified files. You tell us nothing. Gadriel, we deserve to know who is leading us.
This conversation is over.
Then the boys make their way to the lair of the Neurothorpe and attack it, beginning another pseudo-boss fight much like the scrap of the Carnifex and Lictor earlier. That being said, the Neurothorpe, in my opinion, are not as deadly as the Carnifex were in game, maybe a bit spongier in terms of withstanding damage, but the Carnifex was a heavy hitter that was tricky to deal with, especially later on in the game. Also, it is with this level that I discovered my love for the power sword over the chain sword. It's fucking sweet. And then this right here, this scene right here with the might of the Astra Militara making its push across the bridge now that the Blueberry Boys have dealt with the Neurothorpe, and this is just amazing to look at, and I cannot stress it enough how small things such as fighting in the background can make the player feel like they're a part of something much bigger, with the guardsmen moving in with tanks and it's just one massive firefight. It's awesome to look at. If you haven't been able to tell, personally, I like it when it's a more large-scale conflict sort of engagement rather than the typical Call of Duty small group taking out a large imposing figure type of battle. In fact, arguably the strongest COD campaigns nailed this aspect as well. Look at COD 4 with Charlie Don't Serve, Shock and Awe, or even MW2 with On Their Own Accord, and The Enemy of My Enemy. And who could forget the endgame of Black Ops 2 with that segment of soldiers descending upon Menendez's compound. In my humble opinion, I truly believe that those details matter. Anyways, after fully securing the bridge, Titus and his men decide to push onwards towards Morius Luz, and Varellus offers us a ride on his tank to bring the men closer to the temple to retrieve Luz. We enter the building and are greeted by a group of guardsmen in this building ahead of the Temple of Thasian, and the interaction is strange and Varellus demands some answers from the guardsmen. The area is quiet and seemingly secure, and the soldier we speak with is sounding oddly hesitant. Gadriel and Chiron both start to notice things are off as Chiron notices some movement in the shadows, and Gadriel asserts that they are deserters that are trying to avoid the fight. And you know how I mentioned that Varellus is simply destined to live a long and fruitful life of service to the Emperor? Let's see how that plays out.
Captain Fairburn, come in. Captain Fairburn, come in.
Ambush.
Yeah, I've seen some people online try to call BS on the death of this Space Marine here, but I don't know, I feel like some rebar to the eye and to the brain could be cause for death. I think so, at least, Space Marine or not. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Anyways, the men begin to mow down their heretical traitors, but then something interesting happens right here. That's right, that's fucking right, there is a new enemy to be added to the story, and that is the long-teased chaos presence in the story, the Thousand Sons, who are under the influence of Zeech, and have this pretty cool Egyptian vibe to them that is cool, but I would have preferred they'd chosen an enemy with a more distinct color difference between them and the Ultramarines. I mean, it's clear what the difference is, but I would have still rather seen some sort of variety in terms of the colors. And I know that's nitpicky, but I do have to avoid the overly positive accusations I lay upon myself in these videos. The Thousand Sons certainly feel like a real threat within the story, but honestly, overall, I did not find them to be a difficult challenge gameplay-wise. The men make their way inside the temple and discover a group of heretic Astartes mopping up the guardsmen who were protecting Luz and trying to get into his panic room. Space Ronnie Coleman goes into a rage and lunges into the battle against the Thousand Sons below. He breaks the pillar bridge, and Gadriel and Titus are forced to support him from the outside because, wouldn't you know it, it's a trap. Chiron has to deal with this fair share of enemies piling out of the portal, and you and Gadriel both have your own enemies to deal with. Chiron, though, if you watch him, does a tremendous amount of ass-kicking during this little fit of rage he has. I will take this time to discuss some of the voice work, in particular with the main group of characters we are with. Arthur Lee voices Sergeant Gadriel, who is the more interesting of the two companions in my opinion, and I think Lee voices him quite well in combat and during the many elevator conversations. I do think the writing for Gadriel helps out his performance quite a bit. Miles Yakini voices Ronnie Coleman in space, aka Chiron.
Yeah, buddy!
All jokes aside, he does a great job with his role, and as Chiron is the first of the two companions to open up and show some character, I feel like Yakini made it believable. I should also mention that I believe both Yakini and Lee have good chemistry within the game. They have this sense of banter between their two characters, which I appreciate as a brief glimmering sense of humor that pops up in this grim dark fantasy that is 40k. Last but not least, Clive Standen, who voices Dimitri and Titus, does a good job with his role here. I find that each of these actors already have a tough task of trying to make these flawless Ultramarines have depth and seem interesting beyond the machismo they have. Clive Standen himself has a different degree of difficulty to his role, considering the previous game had acclaimed Hollywood actor Mark Strong in the role. stand-in who I've only seen in that movie Everest with Jason Clarke, I think does a better job as Titus than Mark Strong did in the original game. Anyways though, back to the story, we are able to regroup with Chiron, and Titus immediately asks him to explain his recklessness in the face of the arch enemy, and here we get some inkling of some solid character development for Chiron, but it does not really get fleshed out properly later on in the game. Gadriel does interrupt to point out that the three have actually arrived to Luz's position, where we see a group of heretics trying to get into the panic room of Luz. So we descend towards the Temple of Thasian and get to work on destroying altars and wiping these heretic bastards from the face of Avarax. After the battle and clearing out the area of enemies, I do honestly get a kick out of Titus just walking up and banging on the large blast door and yelling "open up," and it works. I'm sure they have some sort of Jabba's Palace little camera door that they can see through, but it's still funny to me that that worked. The door opens and out walks the man we have been sent to retrieve, Morius Luz, who, fun fact, is voiced by Carrie Shale, who was last seen on the channel in the previous video on Evil West where he voiced James Harrow. Luz wishes to speak with Nozick, but is then informed that Nozick is busy being impaled back on Kadaku, and he can't come to the phone right now. Luz seems shaken by this development though. The next scene is one of the more interesting ones plot-wise, as Titus begins to question Luz on the device that is now at the center of the plot, more specifically referring to its power source stemming from his experiences on Graia. Luz tries to assure him that within the right hands and with the right procedures, the power within the artifact is actually quite safe and that they will follow the will of the Omnissiah. Luz overhears Titus receiving orders over the comms, and having now discovered Titus's name, I guess he never introduced himself when he rescued him, he makes an interesting revelation that he heard about a Captain Titus that died on Graia after holding the artifact, seeing somewhat in awe of the possibility that this is the same Titus from 100 years ago. I point out this scene mostly because I find it to be intriguing because of the fact that this information is abruptly dropped on both Chiron and Gadriel inside the Thunderhawk, and considering that Gadriel has been suspicious of Titus since he arrived, and Titus prefers to keep a close hand to his chest, and of course not tell his squad mates anything at all. Especially in that moment when he was trying to reveal and open classified documents in front of them. Afterwards, the two squad mates share a look with each other on the Thunderhawk after Luz says that, and when they go to leave the Thunderhawk, they of course try to ask about it on the way to see Captain Acheran.
What was that between you and Luz?
Irrelevant.
I disagree.
That is your right.
Brother, we only want to help you.
Help! You almost cost us the mission, and now you speak of help.
The men make their way to Acheran, who now states that the heretic Astartes are now arriving in droves and popping up in every hive city, and with the Ultramarines already stretched thin due to the Tyranids, the presence of the Thousand Sons is overwhelming. Acheran also mentions that the Adeptus Mechanicus prepare to unleash the Project Aurora weapon to aid the Ultramarines in defense of the planet. Titus has his obvious issues with this, but Acheran dismisses him yet again. They instead focus upon the Tyranids and working towards getting a message out through the astropathic relay. The message will be sent to Lord Marneus Calgar to inform him of the presence of the Traitor Legion within the system. This mission also has a few operations missions attached to it as well, with one squad of Marines being sent to deal with a comm jammer and also a fucking hive tyrant. Jesus Christ, look them up, they're nuts. I played the operation with some skilled randoms and it was hard enough, but nothing crazy. Titus and his men are then sent to hit the relay and break through the defense and get the message out to Calgar. Before this though, we get another intimidating conversation with Chaplain Quintus. Interesting guy, you know. To which Gadriel seems to actually agree with the chaplain, having concerns over Titus's actions, and the ensuing conversation is crucial to that character development for Gadriel, especially as we'll see in just a bit.
Lieutenant, it should be us facing the Hive Tyrant.
Talassa can handle it.
They have 3 men. We should be with them, but you have us playing courier.
That message has to get through.
And what exactly is that message?
Speak your mind, brother.
I searched the archives. You were once captain of the 2nd Company, and then you disappeared over a century ago.
I was serving with the Death Watch.
There would be records.
Not for a Black Shield.
A Black Shield? You would erase your chapter markings.
I would die for these colors.
Then why?
I was accused. It was my penance.
What were you accused of?
corruption.
Brace for landing.
Move out.
The next mission is pretty cool because there are moments where the Tyranids and Thousand Sons are fighting each other, and that detail is fun to me. The men come to a clearing and the opening to the relay is still some distance away, and there is no clear path, so Titus calls a Hammerfall bunker, and the men are equipped with jump packs once more. I'll let this following scene play out as we get more character developments for Gadriel and get more tension between him and Titus.
We should have remained with the main force.
Why toil in obscurity when there's glory center stage? Hey, Sergeant?
Our brothers are dying while we sneak around in the shadows.
If we fail to send this message, we face a massacre.
You say there will be a massacre. How do you know that?
Why else would the traitors be trying so hard to stop us?
Our lieutenant said it himself. There's deception at work.
If you got something to say, Sergeant. Damn it.
Titus lands, and it's like Gadriel expects to be berated by Titus, but is instead just handed a gun, and they move forward. Defending the relay is our boys the Cadians, and we have arrived at the perfect time, and we can even let Gadriel let loose a little bit. This part right here is pretty fun and slightly difficult. As we attack the relay, after capturing it, we now have to defend it alongside the Cadians. As you can see, this shit is looking like Kason. The enemies keep piling in, the Ultramarines have to fend them off. Eventually, as the fight progresses, the game adds a Carnifex into the mix. At this point, you feel confident in taking one out. However, once the health bar goes down, they do something funny.
Slain the Carnifex. Munitions secured.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are two of them.
But alas, it's a misdirect, because right as the two Carnifex and its supporting Tyranids begin to attack Titus and the crew, there is a large bright green flash and the enemies all perish around you. The Hive Tyrant has been taken out. The men make it inside and prepare to send the message to Lord Calgar. However, something appears to be off. The Psyker Neoma goes off on the deep end and immediately resorts to accusations about Titus, and that is the final straw for Gadriel.
I do not know.
You wish to bring Calgar here that you may kill him! Heretic! Heretic! You will betray us as you betrayed them on Graiad!
Lies.
Arrest him! He means to kill her!
Lieutenant!
Gadriel,
I am no heretic.
He's just the power stone by himself. He must be stopped! Kill the heretic! Kill him!
Enough!
Kill him!
What have you done?
How gracefully you dance.
Yep, so now here we are, introduced to the main antagonist of the story, and that is Imara, who has corrupted Neoma and comes into the material world and attacks the trio, leading to a sort of boss battle with Imara. Consider it stage 1, because you will fight this guy like at least 2 or 3 more times in the game later on. Overall though, I like Imara. I don't find him hard at all, but I really enjoy his personal design, his voice acting as some high quality stuff as well, and also just what he says is interesting. I mean, like 70% of it is talking shit to you and your friends, but whatever. Imara might not be hard, especially in this first fight, but he's definitely no pushover either, as his second stage within this battle here, the fight picks up the intensity quite a bit. Imara manages to escape, and as the fight comes to an end, Chiron explains why he killed Neoma, and Titus puts down the suspicions of Gadriel and does not further reprimand him, to which Gadriel just kinda has to eat it. We return to the battle barge and discover the worst has happened. More Chaos forces have come to the system, Luz and the weapon have been moved to a planet named Demirium, and the Chaos forces have taken control of not only the planet, but also seemingly in possession of both Luz and the artifact. Acheron states that the men have to attack and destroy a warp beacon that the Thousand Suns are using to bring in countless reinforcements. Gadriel has the great idea on how to deal with it. Since Demirium is a burial world and also a ship graveyard apparently, he suggests taking the ship named the Sword of Atreus and basically pull an Admiral Radis from Rogue One and use it to ram the objective to destroy it. Once fucking more, we are requested by the chaplain, and this time told to bring both of our squad mates along. Chaplain hears about what happened with the Astra Telepathica and is not happy. He even ends it with a very apt threat of being brought down for corruption. So here we have a very fun segment where the men are being orbital dropped into combat with jump packs, but before we get to do that, we have to have the final piece of the puzzle that is the character development arc for Gadriel.
Have you ever done this before?
You mean drop through an active combat zone, dodging flak, enemy ships and burning wreckage on the way down?
Exactly.
No, this will be a first.
Say the line, Bart!
The Codex Astartes does not support this action. But I am looking forward to it.
Stay close. It's almost impossible to regroup if we're separated.
60 seconds.
Helmets!
Sir. I must apologize for my actions on Abrax.
Unnecessary.
I fell prey to suspicion. Almost killed you.
When I was a young captain, one of my men questioned my motives, brushed his concerns aside, and I paid the price. Your suspicions arose because I failed to answer your doubts, as I failed to answer his.
Stand by for suborbital drop.
I'm honored to fight beside you both.
As are we, brother.
You grew up on Calth. Let's say we settle some of that debt today.
Aye, sir.
Engage thrust. Hold Shabbat.
Honestly, as this review has gone on, while writing this and rewatching the clips, I have really come to enjoy Gadriel as a character. Is it a tad wishy-washy for how he reacts? Maybe. I mean, every time he went with his suspicions, he was proven to be wrong, so I appreciate the writers stopping themselves from just repeating with another different version of Leandros, if you will. And they tease that with the Codex Astartes line, as Leandros said it in the first game, which you again have probably seen as a meme on social media. The descent sequence is fun and overall quite chaotic. It's not too difficult, although I did hit 1 or 2, maybe 3 obstacles and incurred some damage. As a set piece, however, it's pretty sweet and just adds more awesome to the image of Space Marine 2. The men land into the Demirium wastelands and have to fight through hordes of chaos forces to make their way to the enemy vessel to help with targeting. This level is also fucking great because of the Thunderhammer. In the campaign, I find it to be more useful and fun to use rather than its implementation in the online side of things, but as you can see in the background, you can just smash through enemies with this fucking thing. Also, with the jump packs, I personally found it quite satisfying to come raining down swinging with the Thunderhammer to splatter huge groups of enemies. The men then set up the targeting system and then must defend it naturally as the Sword of Atreus prepares to ram into the warp beacon. Once the men smash through the heretic forces attacking their position, and they look up to see the Thalassa squadron once again coming up clutch as the Sword of Atreus successfully rams into the beacon, destroying it. From there, the men are being directed to a Mechanicus facility as they have indications that Luz or somebody else is attempting to use the weapon. At that moment, Imera appears again. The men then fight their way to the facility and discover it is deep underground in a mine, which is concerning since again this is a burial world. They get quarantined and head down into the mine. Within said mine, of course, there are loads of chaos forces that the men must cut through and then finally descend deeper into the mine trying to get closer to Marius Luz. Then once again coming down the elevator, we get probably one of the biggest cock teases in all of video games recently, where the men come across a large Necron tomb in the mine, and I, along with surely many other people, thought this endgame sequence was going to get crazier. But alas, it means pretty much nothing and is simply just in the background for the level design. However, as we continue fighting and slaying the heretics, we push closer to Luz and the weapon itself and notice the chaos soldiers that were descending towards him are frozen in stasis and are now destroyed with one swing of the hammer. Titus then attempts to speak with Luz to convince him to stop. Ultimately, he will do no such thing though. Then we get a little bit of a repeat from last game, which I can't tell if it's natural and on brand or just lazy on behalf of the developers and writers.
Forgive me, Lord. Time will reveal the purity of my intentions.
You tiny grains of sand, prattling as you tumble. For a moment it seems you might do my work for me. But alas, I must finish this myself. With this brute power!
Your malignant energies are useless! Where is he? With Aurora active, he and others like him cannot exist here!
We will see.
This is just the beginning. With these devices, we will seal the Great Rift and drive the heretics back into the warp with nothing more than a transference of alignment.
What genius! Alas, dear Luz, from which ocean did you gather these pearls of wisdom? Is it not the dream of every scientist to discover the birthplace of all knowledge? Behold!
Yeah, basically Imra reveals that he was orchestrating the efforts of Luz and planting the ideas and motivations in his mind for Project Aurora. I say it feels lazy because it is somewhat similar to what transpired in the first game back in 2011, with Chaos Lord Nemeroth using Inquisitor Drogon as a puppet slash sleeper agent, sleeper cell, it refers to it as that. Either way, something was an illusion and it was orchestrated by a figure behind the scenes. Obvious differences, yeah, but still very similar. Imra then fucking smites Luz and kills him, and now it is clear that the artifact actually emboldens the strength of the Chaos forces, and Imra leaves to prepare for the final battle, as he says to Titus. The men now have to make their way to the surface, and in doing so the game will essentially have the trio of characters recap the mystery of the plot and the connection to Chaos.
Titus to Acheran. Do you read me? Damn it. How could that fool Luz not have known? He took the whisperings of that sorcerer to be his own inspiration. Luz was merely a pawn. They killed Nozick, led us to believe they would do the same to Luz. So we would deliver him precisely where they wanted him. And that spectacle in the catacombs. Deceit, to trick that puppet Luz into finishing the work.
The men then arrive to the surface to see the giant Chaos obelisk in the distance, and shit is getting serious. The warp is open to see and the feelings of corruption rages. We can see some guardsmen succumbing to the warp exposure as well, and I find it interesting to see varying levels of corruption, and seeing some of them try to fight it off is pretty cool as well in my opinion. Even more so, it becomes interesting when the trio of characters link up with a group of Cadians who are able to fully resist the corruption and keep fighting. The men help fend off an attack, and they push forward to the location of Captain Acheran. When we get there are some Chaos forces attacking their position, with two unnamed Ultramarines defending the door. Once inside, we come to a meeting with Sarkana and Acheran as he asks just what the fuck happened. Acheran is preparing his Ultramarine forces for another assault on the arch enemy. As we exit and follow Acheran into battle, we see a Helldrake fly in and take out some of the guardsmen. The Helldrake was actually first seen during the jump pack descent onto the planet's surface. The men are attempting to make their way to a cut-off group of Ultramarines that had the company standard flag with them, and Titus is able to fight his way to the standard, which then kicks off a pretty fun sequence when all the soldiers form up and fire away at the incoming Chaos forces that are barreling in from various portals. It is starting to feel like the second company is being overwhelmed when a Hellbrute spawns in and immediately begins squashing dudes, and things start to look dire until... Allies come in flying to make the save, and the man leading the charge is none other than fucking Chapter Master of the Ultramarines and Lord of Macragge, Lord Marneus Calgar. He got the message from before, and now it's time to prepare for the final battle. While Calgar, Acheran, Titus discuss on how they can remedy the situation and destroy the obelisk and close the rift, Gadriel makes the fine observation from Luz before that the obelisk and the rift had been opened after Luz had transferred the alignment of the small version of the obelisk on the table. This moment here is great because Titus has to reaffirm the assessment of Gadriel and confirm his trust in his squad. For me, it's good character growth for Titus. And now, after hours of slaying heretics and killing Tyranids, it is time to commence the final battle, but first, a rousing speech from Lord Calgar.
Brothers, the heretics clamor for a taste of victory, but we will defy them this day, as we have defied them for 10 millennia. We are the sons of Ultramar, servants to the Emperor and guardians of the Imperium. Let these wretches feel the wrath of ancient vengeance!
My lord, our vanguard forces are through the field.
Hit them hard, Captain!
This This right here is the best usage of the large-scale conflict here, as we have a mass of not just soldiers but space marines and their tanks moving towards the enemy in this awesome moment. Like where I discussed the large surrounding battle on Avarax were cool, this one takes the cake as we are now involved in that huge mass of marines heading into battle.
Yes, my lord.
Captain, form a defensive line here.
Company! Defensive line!
Brother Titus, you will have only moments to execute your plans. Move quickly.
The men make it to the first control panel and must first figure out how to shift the structure. There are actually a few of these that need to be realigned, and a few of them are to be completed in the operations game mode, so during the mission here, it is the Viridian and Thalassa squads that are dealing with the other obelisks. The men make the realization that the obelisk must be turned by hand and the power it possesses could be dangerous, so naturally fitting with his slow turn into a real trusting squad mate, Gadriel is the first to shift the alignment by just raw dogging it, just grabbing that bitch just with his fucking hand. Once this change is made, the obelisk will rotate and fire off a green Necron-like beam at the rift, and the Lord of Change in the middle, and the battlefield seems to take some damage from this as well. Once more, a Hellbrute is spawned in, and unlucky for me here, it spawned in like right beside me and smacked me right away. Once you deal with that though, Titus is given confirmation that the squad Viridian has succeeded in their goal. As you can see, the other obelisk off in the distance rotate. Then we meet one of the best characters in the game who technically does not even have a name.
Where are the traitors?
They are everywhere. Honored brother, join us, and you may sate your rage and aid our cause.
Lead me to the slaughter.
Onward.
Yep, there is a name on the front of the chassis. I believe it says Valtis, but other than that, he's just Dreadnought, and he's an absolute shit wrecker. At the next obelisk, Chiron makes the move to realign said obelisk, which to be honest, they should have let him do it from the get-go, considering the metal arm he has, which theoretically would give him less damage, or at least he'd feel less damage. Or am I tripping there? I don't know. Someone comment down below. This then leads us to probably one of the coolest Warhammer cutscenes I've seen, and one that probably a lot of people who may not even have played the game have seen as well through social media. Which I will say, these last few cutscenes towards the end of the game look fantastic. I'm honestly quite surprised Titus and his men were able to get inside the portal considering they're balls of steel, but they do, and they end up in what I believe was recently revealed to be a pocket dimension of sorts within the warp, not actually the warp, the immaterium. The final level here in terms of the appearance is also pretty neat. It feels like a fitting place to end on as well. I love the purple colors along the side. I'm no heretic, but I will say as a design enthusiast, it looks quite nice. As the men move forward in search of Lord Calgar, Imra continues to talk shit to you. They find Imra at a clearing as well, and naturally, they open fire. This then leads us into our final battle with Imra. Alongside him this time is the giant fucking Lord of Change. It is not a bad boss fight, mind you, I just did not find it overly challenging, just like all the ones before. Perhaps the hardest difficulty second run of the campaign is going to be worth it, and I believe in terms of the DLC content that they're coming out with, I think a new difficulty level called Lethal is in the works or coming out. I might be wrong on that, but that should be worth checking out as well. Imra does have a few clear advantages in that he is incredibly fast and ports around to attack at times, and not only that, but he can deal quite an amount of damage when he does make contact. Fighting the Lord of Change as well is also pretty cool. The damage done to it also deals damage to Imra, and my only gripe with this portion of the fight is that it feels a tad cliche with the literal glowing weak spot that the men must fire into. Once you take down Brazilian Big Bird, the men are transported into a black void. When trying to look for a way out, they do discover Lord Calgar. He makes sure you're not a villainous illusion, and then the whole group must fight together looking for a way out. It is an interesting sight to see Lord Calgar smash through the enemies on the way to Imra, who is at the end of the Black Void. Here we get another cutscene that I think is really fucking cool until something absolutely silly happens. Just going to cut in here quickly and explain first, because I find the rest of the game ending cutscene to actually be really good, and I just want to clarify what I thought was silly about this. Now, given that Imra is within that beam of light and the men are fighting literally just the Lord of Change, he should be able to stop Titus, right? I mean, as Titus makes a run for the final obelisk piece and his men are firing only at fucking Garibaldo over there, fully occupied, arguably even losing at one point. When Titus gets close, he is trying to withstand an energy field and the power, and Imra does fucking nothing? He even says, I see it all. Clearly fucking not, man. He talks more shit, and it sounds awesome, but he is ultimately defeated by bad peripheral vision. Like, does he just not believe one single Marine could do it? Is he just that fucking ignorant? Is that what it is? It's hubris? Maybe. I don't know. I'm a casual newcomer fan of this realm of science fiction, so I could be just making an ass of myself. Also, just to top it off, I genuinely laughed at that little fucking gasp he does when he realizes he's like, oh, fuck! But anyways, rant over. Here's the second half of the cutscene. That's pretty cool and inspiring.
Brother, it is over. You did it. Brother!
Rise, Titus. Your duty is not yet done. For the Emperor! For the Emperor!
Then we are transported back to the Brazilian, and Titus is given an honor for his efforts in the game. He is given the Laurels of Victory that is placed upon his helmet by none other than Lord Calgar himself. And it's great to see this sort of happy ending for Titus given the outcome of the previous game. But before the game ends, Calgar speaks with Titus and commends your true devotion and also happens to lay out the groundwork for a potential sequel. He says that the chaplain had personally suggested Titus for the task, which is odd considering the words to the three men before the final act of the game. Akron says his thank yous and goodbyes as well, and then finally must say goodbye to the squad, Chiron and Gadriel.
Brothers, I am called to serve elsewhere.
You'll be missed, my lord.
I will not forget the blood we have drawn together.
Nor shall we.
I owe you both a debt. You have restored my faith in brotherhood.
We shall await your return.
Courage and honor.
Courage and honor.
Then, finally, that asshole chaplain.
Lord Calgar has informed you of your assignment. Good. I will brief you en route.
You are joining us.
I am.
Very good, my lord.
You have done well. You have won the trust of your brothers. And of the chapter master. But know this, Titus. The stain of suspicion never completely fades. I will be watching you, should you falter on the path for even a moment. I will show no mercy.
Leandros.
My lord, it is time.
Yep, so that's right, the chaplain that has been basically harassing Titus throughout the game turns out to be the dickish rookie from the previous game, Leandros. Which, if the opening bit in this video did not make it obvious, Leandros was the guy who got Titus into the whole mess in the first place since he reported Titus for possible corruption back on Graia 100 years ago. He got Titus arrested and investigated that led to him being moved to the Death Watch and more specifically to the Black Shields. Now, from my readings across game reviews, other YouTube videos, and various forum posts that people with some experience with the lore and knowledge of it had an assumption that Quintus here was actually going to be Leandros, and some people thought of it as a fitting progression for that character, while others thought it was a ham-fisted attempt by the writers in the game. I'll leave that up to you, and I will hope that the story comes to a head in a third game, which by all means this should get a third game. I don't think it'll take 13 years like it did with this sequel, but since once more it ends on a cliffhanger, I strongly believe that a sequel is at least planned for by Saber. The game itself obviously comes at a time where Warhammer is very popular, and demand is going to be higher for this third game. I mean, sales-wise, Space Marine 2 did rather well, and that will help in getting that third and possibly final game for this story arc. So that's Space Marine 2. A game that I believe is a whole lot of awesome jammed into arguably too short of a game. The gameplay is definitely the best part of the package delivered here, and I've heard people critique the lore usage here and there, and I am unfortunately not knowledgeable enough to notice and dislike those things and critique it properly, so my review may come off as blissfully ignorant to some people, and ultimately it is what it is. As a video game though, this shit slaps, no doubt about it. From a power fantasy perspective, slaps. As a AAA Warhammer experience, it slaps, in my opinion. The game obviously has its setbacks that are quite noticeable, the first and foremost being the feeling that there are chunks missing from the story, with the one notable thing being the sweet-ass Necron tomb back on Demirium. The game itself, though, has good voice acting as well throughout the story, and I feel like they truly fit the characters. One other person I'll bring up is Imra and his voice actor, Alistair Petrie. Now, weird thing here is that it's not listed on his IMDb, nor on the game's official IMDb, as his credit as voice actor is only through pages like Dexerto. That being said, though, he does an excellent job with his lines and his rendition. Obviously, there are effects added to his voice to make it sound more chaosy, I guess, but nonetheless, he does a good job. Alistair Petrie is a name you may remember from things such as Star Wars Rogue One. Overall, though, I would say the game is a slam dunk 8 out of 10 from me. The game itself is incredibly fun, and the set pieces and large-scale conflicts are really well done and adds to the fun for me personally. The characters are pretty good for the most part, they have their clear character arcs, and I do wish that Chiron got a bit more room to shine, but Gadriel's place in the story was still really well executed. If the game gets a sequel, I will most definitely be doing a video on it, much like I did here. So, with that being said, I appreciate any and all of you who have made it to the end of the video here. Comment down below what you liked or disliked about Space Marine 2, and I will be replying to basically all the comments like I normally try to. As usual, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed it enough to subscribe and like the video as well. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.